AITA for exposing my boyfriend's and sister's affair at her baby shower? NSFW. Warning, this is quite long. I tried to chop it down but a lot of context was needed. This is a throwaway account because I don't want anyone I know to know I made this. For context, I, F20, and my boyfriend, M21, have been in a relationship since we were 15. For the sake of this post, I will call my sister Jenna and my boyfriend Chris. I first noticed Jenna's, F22, jealousy since me and Chris first got together when we were 15. Jenna always got attention from men and I never did. She always had a boyfriend or some sort of hookup and it was easy for her to constantly have one because she was a teenage boy's fantasy, makeup always done, an hourglass figure, big breasts, short skirts and crop tops, you get the point. I was the complete opposite. I was an awkward teenager with a small group of similarly awkward friends. I didn't show off my body because I was not confident with it at all. I was always chubby and never really motivated to do much about it until I joined an after-school sports club in our small town. It was there that I met Chris, who I formed a friendship with very quickly and soon enough, a relationship. That was the only male attention I'd ever had but I didn't care about that. He accepted me when I was overweight and when I started getting into shape, he congratulated me but reminded me constantly that he loves me regardless of what I look like. After a few months of dating, I introduced Chris to the family and he started coming over nearly every day as he not only got on well with the household but his family life was a very hostile and abusive one. Anyway, Jenna started making remarks about my weight even though I had lost quite a lot and said that Chris deserved a pretty girl like her. She would wear skimpy clothes around Chris and subtly flirted with him all the time, but he never entertained it, at least, not in front of me. Shortly after he turned 17, Chris moved in. We have a big house so we were able to do this thankfully, and both of us we will always be grateful for my parents taking him in considering the abuse he was suffering from his parents. Despite having a big house, Chris and I still had to share a room. Jenna was now 18 and had dropped out. Her reason for doing so I am not sure but she was home constantly and had no intention of getting a job despite mom and dad repeatedly nagging her to. Chris had also practically dropped out, but at least had a part-time job. I continued going to college, meaning I was gone from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. every day. The thought of leaving Chris at home with my sister while both parents were at work, meaning they were alone together most of the day, discouraged me but I did not want to be a jealous girlfriend, so never brought it up. I noticed that they were kind of touchy with each other as the months went by. It was little things, like for example if they were both in the kitchen at the same time, Chris would put his hands on her hips as he passed her by. Friday nights would be mine and Chris movie nights, but she found any excuse to come into our room with us and join in or would sometimes whisk him away to her room to play video games together. I did eventually bring it up to both of them and they told me I was just jealous and insecure. Jenna specifically said I will always be that fat insecure girl and that I was freaking out because I knew she could steal Chris from me in a heartbeat. It devastated me. A month after she said that, she found out she was pregnant. Everyone was confused because she hadn't mentioned any boyfriend or anything like that at the time. She said it must have been when she hooked up with a random guy from the club. In time, she had the baby and we all looked after her. Especially Chris who sometimes sat with Jenna and the baby, I will call her Lily for anonymity, for hours watching TV, calling it family time. Again, I didn't want to look insecure and prove Jenna right, so I kept quiet. Fast forward to 2023, me and Chris welcomed our son in May. I will call him Miles for the post, and Chris barely pays him any attention. He gave more affection to Lily who wasn't even his own child. I confronted him about it and this time everyone hopped on my case, including my parents. I was accused of letting my personal insecurities drive a wedge between the family and that I was jealous of Jenna. I protested that this was not the case and that I was just pointing out that my child was not being treated fairly by his own father no less. My parents concluded that I either left it alone or I found my own place and considering I was working a minimum wage job I was unable to afford that at the time. So I chose to just ignore both of them and accept the relationship as basically over at this point. Chris and I no longer went on dates, he didn't come to my scans when I was pregnant and nor did he come to Miles' appointments. So it shouldn't have surprised me that in August, after coming back home from taking Miles to a doctor's appointment, I walked into Chris and Jenna having sex in our bedroom. They had left Lily downstairs on her own unattended. I pulled out my phone and recorded both of them squirming around trying to cover themselves and screamed at them before taking Miles with me to a friend's house after telling her the situation. Both of them laughed as I left the house crying with a screaming infant. I called my parents to let them know the situation and they defended Chris and Jenna, saying sometimes things happen and people fall for each other. I hung up and stayed with my friend for the next week. Eventually, I did have to come back but I avoided any type of communication with Chris or Jenna. It was completely awkward. Nobody initiated a breakup talk or a conversation about what I had seen, and I was strangely okay with that at this point. That was until Jenna fell pregnant in September. That was my final straw, so I arranged to move in with my friend and took all of mine and Miles' things with me. My parents argued with me about it, but Chris and Jenna expressed relief that we were leaving. Chris didn't even say goodbye to Miles. I felt like I had not done me or my child justice and had a burning desire for revenge, so when Jenna stupidly invited my friend to her baby shower this month, I saw the perfect opportunity to out them. By now, they were publicly in a relationship and they'd made a narrative that I was abusive to Chris, so he left me and found solace in Jenna. On February 15th, I left Miles with my friend, shout out to her by the way, she has been more of a second parent to him than Chris ever was, and I pulled up to Jenna's baby shower. When I walked into the venue, I felt absolute satisfaction watching Chris and Jenna's faces drop. Jenna began to cuss and told our cousin to get me out of the baby shower, but I refused to budge. I publicly called them out for having an affair and questioned the paternity of Lily. I then showed the video to everyone in attendance, including my parents. Some people looked at Jenna and Chris in disgust, some people looked at me in disgust and told me it was not the time nor place. I left after that and was messaged by several people at the party saying that I'd caused a scene and was a terrible person. AITA,